Welcome to Life Stories, where we explore tales of courage, resilience, and the unyielding power of love. Today, we bring you the gripping story of Rachel and her young daughter, Lily, who faced unimaginable fear but found hope and strength in each other. It's a journey that highlights the importance of community, the fight for safety, and the enduring bond between a mother and her child. Join us as we uncover their path to healing and triumph over adversity. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to begin today's powerful and heartwarming story. Let's dive in. It was an unusually quiet evening in a modest apartment on Maple Grove Street. Just a short distance from the bustle of downtown Chicago. The soft hum of a refrigerator filled the silence, blending with the faint laughter of children playing in the nearby park. Inside, Elena stood in the small kitchen, her hands submerged in warm, soapy water as she washed a stack of dishes. The day's work at her part-time job had been long and tiring, but this routine brought her a moment of calm. In the living room, 3-year-old Lucy sat on a patterned rug, her favorite stuffed bear, Pepe, clutched tightly in her arms. She giggled softly to herself, making Pepe dance across her knees. For a moment, everything felt normal, but it was a fragile piece, one that Elena had learned could shatter at any moment. And then it did. The front door slammed open with a force that made the walls tremble. The sharp crack of wood hitting the frame jolted Elena, sending the glass bowl she was washing clattering into the sink. Water splashed over her hands, but she barely noticed as she spun around, her heart racing. James stormed into the apartment, his steps heavy and uneven. The faint smell of alcohol clung to him, mingling with the sharp edge of his cologne. His bloodshot eyes darted around the room, his face twisted in a scowl that radiated anger. He was a man on the edge, and the air around him seemed to hum with tension. "James," Elena stammered, her voice trembling. "What are you doing?" He ignored her. Instead, he marched to the center of the room, tossing his bag onto the floor. The contents spilled out, a tangle of crumpled papers, an empty flask, and loose coins scattering across the carpet. Lucy froze, her small frame shrinking behind the sofa. Her bright, curious eyes peeked through the gap between the cushions, watching her father with a mix of confusion and fear. Pepe fell limp in her hands. "James, I'm asking you a question." Elena's voice wavered, but there was a faint edge of defiance in it. She wasn't a timid woman by nature, but years of living with James had worn her down, turning each moment into a careful balancing act. She knew how quickly his temper could flare, and she knew how dangerous it could be when it did. James turned on her, his gaze sharp and unforgiving. "Who do you think you are to talk to me like that?" His voice was low but carried the weight of a storm gathering strength. Before Elena could respond, he took a step toward her, his movements sharp and erratic. "You're home all day," he roared, pointing toward the dining table, where a few unwashed plates Saturday, "and yet, this house is always a mess. What the hell do you even do?" Elena took a step back, gripping the edge of the counter for support. Her pulse pounded in her ears. "I've been working, James. I'm trying my best." Her words seemed to ignite something in him. In an instant, he closed the distance between them, his hand gripping her wrist tightly. He yanked her toward him with a force that made her stumble. "How many times have I told you?" he began, his voice rising. But Elena cut him off, her voice shaky but firm. "Not in front of Lucy. James, please." Her words seemed to pierce through the haze of his anger. If only for a moment. His gaze flicked toward the living room, where Lucy's small frame was barely visible behind the sofa. But instead of calming him, it only seemed to enrage him further. "Lucy," he sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "You're the one spoiling her. You think I don't see it? She'll grow up weak, just like you." Elena's heart clenched at his words, but she refused to look away. "She's just a child, James. She doesn't deserve this." "Lucy." unable to take her eyes off the scene unfolding before her. Clutched Pepe tightly. Her little hands trembled. And tears welled in her wide eyes. She didn't fully understand what was happening. But she knew one thing for sure, her mommy was in trouble. Quietly, she reached for the toy phone her mother had given her for her birthday. She pressed the buttons, pretending to call for help. But when she realized the toy wasn't real, she froze. Her mind raced, remembering what her mommy had told her once: if you're ever scared, call this number. Call 911. Determined, Lucy crawled on her hands and knees toward her mother's bedside table. Her tiny hands fumbled with the drawer before pulling out the real phone. She pressed the numbers slowly, her small fingers trembling. When the line connected, she whispered into the receiver, her voice barely audible. "Mister, please help my mommy. She's hurt." On the other end, Charles, a calm and steady 911 operator, immediately recognized the urgency in her voice. "Sweetheart, can you tell me your name? Where's your mommy right now?" "My name is Lucy," she whispered, glancing nervously toward the kitchen where James loomed over her mother. "Our door is blue. Please hurry." Charles's heart tightened as he heard the fear in her voice. "We're coming, Lucy. I promise. Just stay on the line with me." Meanwhile, in the kitchen, James's fury continued to build. He grabbed Elena's arm again, this time pulling her forcefully toward the living room. "You think you can talk back to me in my house?" he spat, his voice thick with rage. Lucy held the phone tightly to her ear, crouching low behind the sofa. Her heart pounded as she whispered to Charles, his yelling at mommy, "Please hurry." Charles's voice remained calm, but his urgency was clear as he relayed the information to the rapid response team. "We have a child in danger on Maple Grove Street. The situation is escalating. Let's move." Unaware that help was already on the way, James continued his tirade, his anger filling every corner of the small apartment. But in her small, trembling hands, Lucy held a lifeline, a glimmer of hope that would change everything. Lucy crouched behind the sofa, clutching the phone as if it were her only shield against the storm raging in her home. Her tiny voice trembled as she stayed on the line with Charles, the calm voice on the other end. "Sweetheart, can you tell me anything else about your home?" Charles asked gently, trying to keep her talking. He knew that every moment counted. Lucy sniffled and wiped her nose on her sleeve, whispering, "There's a park outside, and our window has flowers." She dared to peek over the edge of the sofa, her wide eyes fixed on James. His voice boomed as he continued to shout at her mother, his fists clenched at his sides. Lucy could see the redness in his face and the way her mommy's shoulders trembled as she tried to stay strong. "Lucy," Charles said softly, his steady tone cutting through the chaos in her mind. "You're doing so well. I promise we're going to help you and your mommy. Just stay very quiet and stay hidden." Back in the kitchen, Elena struggled to keep her composure. Her wrist throbbed from James's grip, but her mind was focused on one thing: protecting Lucy. "James," she said carefully, her voice trembling but steady, "you're scaring her. Please. Let's talk about this later. Let her go to her room." James's bloodshot eyes locked onto hers, his expression a mixture of rage and bitterness. "Don't tell me what to do," he snapped. "You think you can control me? In my own house?" He stepped closer, his presence looming over her, and Elena instinctively stepped back, bumping into the counter. Lucy flinched at the sound of her father's voice growing louder. She could feel her chest tightening, her small breaths coming faster. "Mister," she whispered into the phone. "He's getting really mad. Please help." Charles's voice softened even more, though urgency gripped his every word. "I hear you, Lucy. The police are almost there. You're so brave. Just keep being quiet. Okay." Outside, the flashing lights of police cars began to reflect on the buildings of Maple Grove Street. Officers moved quickly but carefully, coordinating under the guidance of their team leader, Officer Charles Daniels. "Mary, the upstairs neighbor, stood outside the apartment building, wringing her hands. "Please hurry," she begged. "I've been hearing shouting for a while now. I'm afraid he'll hurt them." Inside, the situation was deteriorating. James paced the living room like a caged animal, his anger seemingly consuming him. He scanned the room, his eyes narrowing as he shouted, "Lucy, I know you're here somewhere. Come out right now." His voice thundered, shaking the already tense air. Elena's heart dropped, fear gripping her as she tried to divert his attention. "James, leave her alone. She's just a child," she pleaded, stepping in his path. But James shoved her aside, causing her to stumble against the sofa. Lucy clutched the phone tighter, tears spilling onto her cheeks as she tried to stay silent. "He's looking for me," she whispered into the phone, her voice barely audible. Charles's voice steadied her. "Stay hidden. Lucy, don't move. Help is right outside your door." At that moment, there was a loud knock at the apartment door, cutting through James's tirade like a blade. "This is the police. Open the door immediately," came a commanding voice. James froze, his eyes darting toward the door. The realization of what was happening seemed to hit him like a blow, and for a moment, he looked disoriented. But then, his expression darkened, and his jaw tightened. "You called the cops," he hissed, turning toward Elena. "I didn't," Elena said quickly, holding up her hands in a gesture of surrender. "James, please, just let them help us." The banging on the door grew louder, and outside, Officer Daniels signaled for his team to prepare to breach. "We've got confirmation of a child in danger," he said firmly. "Move in on my mark." Inside, Lucy pressed herself deeper into the shadows behind the sofa, holding her breath as she listened to the sounds of her father's rage. She didn't understand everything that was happening, but she knew one thing: the man on the phone had promised to help. And she believed him. Elena, battered and frightened, glanced toward the sofa, silently praying that Lucy would stay hidden. In that moment, as the tension in the apartment reached its breaking point, the faint sound of sirens grew louder, signaling that the end of this nightmare was near. The banging at the door reverberated through the apartment like thunder, and the tension inside was palpable. James's eyes darted to the locked door, his grip on the chaos in the room slipping further. He moved quickly, grabbing a chair and shoving it under the doorknob to barricade the entrance. "They won't take me," he growled, his voice venomous. Elena clutched her aching wrist, trying to steady her breathing. She could feel the bruises forming, but her concern wasn't for herself. Her eyes flickered to the sofa where Lucy was hiding. She needed to protect her daughter at all costs. "James, stop this," she yelled, her voice cracking under the weight of fear. "Let them help you. This doesn't have to go any further." James turned to her, his expression twisted in fury and desperation. "Help me," he spat. "They don't care about me. No one does. You think I'm just going to sit here and let them ruin my life?" His voice was rising with each word, his body trembling with barely contained rage. Lucy, still crouched behind the sofa, hugged her stuffed bear tightly, her tiny hands trembling. She pressed the phone to her ear, her faith in Charles the only thread keeping her together. "Mister," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "His blocking the door." Charles, standing outside the apartment with his team, spoke calmly into his headset. "Lucy, stay quiet. We're here. We're going to get you and your mom out safely. I promise." His voice carried the weight of authority, but there was a deep compassion beneath it. A promise he intended to keep no matter what. Inside, the air grew thick with tension. James began pacing again, muttering to himself. Elena saw the opportunity to try to reason with him. "James," she said softly, stepping forward cautiously, "think about Lucy. She's scared. She's just a little girl. Don't talk to me about Lucy." James roared, slamming his fist onto the dining table. The plates rattled loudly, making Elena flinch. You've turned her against me. You've turned everyone against me. She's your daughter. Elena shot back, her voice filled with desperation. She loves you. Don't do this. James. Don't let her remember you like this. Her words seemed to hit him, and for a brief moment, his expression faltered. But the pounding at the door snapped him back into his rage. They won't win, he muttered, grabbing a small folding knife from the counter. He turned to Elena, holding it up threateningly. And neither will you. Elena's heart raced as she backed away, her mind scrambling for a way to keep Lucy safe. You don't have to do this, James, she said, trying to keep her voice calm despite the knife glinting in the dim light. Just let Lucy go. She doesn't deserve this. Outside, Charles motioned to his team. We need to move now, he said firmly. He's escalating. And the child is still inside. One officer whispered. We don't have a clear shot. We'll create one. Charles replied. Determination etched on his face. On my signal. James turned back to the sofa, his voice cutting through the room like a blade. Lucy, get out here now. Or I swear, before he could finish. Elena threw herself in front of him, blocking his path. No, she screamed, her voice echoing in defiance. You'll have to go through me first. The sound of her voice jolted Lucy, who clutched her bear even tighter, tears streaming down her face. She didn't understand why her daddy was so angry, but she understood her mommy's courage. Please. Mister, she whispered into the phone, her voice shaking. Please save my mommy. At that moment, Charles gave the order. The door burst open with a deafening crash, and officers poured into the apartment, their weapons raised. Police. Drop the knife. Charles's voice thundered, commanding the room. James froze, his wild eyes darting between the officers and Elena. He gripped the knife tighter, his knuckles white. But the sight of the armed officers seemed to finally pierce through his rage. Stay back, he screamed, dragging Elena toward him as a human shield. Don't come any closer. Lucy watched from behind the sofa, her small body trembling as the room erupted into chaos. Charles locked eyes with her, his expression softening for a brief moment before returning to the intense focus of the situation. Lucy, he said gently but firmly, it's going to be okay. Stay where you are. James's breathing grew heavier as the reality of the situation began to close in on him. The officers surrounded him, their presence suffocating. You think you can just come in here and take my family? He yelled, his voice cracking under the weight of his emotions. James, Charles said, his voice steady but firm. Let her go. This doesn't have to end badly. You're outnumbered. And we're here to help. But James wasn't listening. His grip on Elena tightened as he shouted. You're not taking them from me. The tension reached its breaking point, the room thick with fear and anticipation. Lucy watched, her small heart pounding as the officers prepared to act. She clutched her bear tightly, whispering to herself, please save mommy. The room was a storm of emotions, every second feeling like an eternity. James stood in the center, gripping the knife with one hand and Elena's wrist with the other. His face was a mixture of rage and desperation, his eyes darting from the officers to the barricaded door. It was as though his mind couldn't decide whether to lash out or crumble under the weight of the situation. James. Charles began again, stepping forward slowly, his hands raised in a non-threatening gesture. You don't want to do this. Let her go. And we'll talk. We're here to help you. James sneered, his laugh bitter and hollow. Help me? That's rich. Nobody ever helps me. You think you can waltz in here and fix everything? You're all the same. Elena, still trapped in his grip, could feel his hand trembling. It wasn't just anger fueling him anymore, it was fear. James. Listen to him, she said softly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. This can end peacefully. Please. For Lucy's sake. At the mention of Lucy, His eyes flickered toward the sofa where the little girl had been hiding. But now the spot was empty. James's face twisted in confusion and then fury. "Where is she?" he growled, tightening his grip on Elena. "What did you do with her?" Lucy, in a desperate act of bravery, had slipped out from behind the sofa and was now crouched by the closet. Her small figure trembled as she peeked out, clutching her stuffed bear tightly. She didn't know what to do. Her mommy was in trouble. And the man she once called Daddy wasn't himself anymore. Charles noticed her movement out of the corner of his eye. He subtly shifted his stance to block James's view. His focus now split between de-escalating James and keeping Lucy safe. "James. She's okay," Charles said firmly. "She's scared. But she's okay. Let's not make this worse for her." James's grip loosened slightly, and Elena felt it. She took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage she had. "James. You love her, don't you? You love Lucy." Her words were measured, her tone filled with both desperation and hope. James hesitated, the knife trembling in his hand. "Of course I love her," he barked, his voice breaking. "But you turned her against me. You made her afraid of me." "She's not afraid of you," Elena countered quickly. "She's afraid of what's happening right now. She doesn't understand this. She's just a child." For a fleeting moment, James's eyes softened. The weight of what he was doing seemed to dawn on him. His grip on Elena slackened further, and she took a cautious step back. But the rage returned just as quickly, and he raised the knife once more. "Stay back," he shouted at the officers. Suddenly, a small voice cut through the tension. "Daddy, please stop." It was Lucy, standing in the corner near the closet, her tiny figure illuminated by the harsh light from the hallway. Her stuffed bear hung limply in her hand, and her wide eyes were filled with tears. "Don't hurt Mommy, please." James froze, his gaze locking onto his daughter. The knife in his hand wavered, and his face contorted with conflicting emotions. "Lucy," he whispered, his voice cracking. For a moment, he looked like a man lost, a father realizing the enormity of his actions. Charles seized the moment, stepping closer. "James. She needs you to stop. She needs you to let go of the anger. It's not too late." James's arm dropped slightly, the knife lowering. Elena stepped forward, her voice trembling but strong. "Lucy needs her father, James. But not like this. Not like this." The room held its breath as James stood motionless, his shoulders sagging as though the weight of the world had finally caught up to him. The knife slipped from his fingers and clattered to the floor. An officer swiftly moved in, pulling Elena to safety while another restrained James. Elena ran to Lucy, dropping to her knees and pulling her daughter into a tight embrace. "Mommy's here," she whispered, her tears soaking into Lucy's hair. "You're safe now." Lucy clung to her, sobbing. "I was so scared. Mommy." "I know. Sweetheart." Elena replied, her voice breaking. "I know." Charles stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "James Carter, you're under arrest. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." James didn't resist. His head hung low, and the fire in his eyes was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. As the officers led him away, he glanced back at Lucy and Elena. His lips moved as if to say something, but no sound came out. Outside, the cold night air hit Elena like a wave, but it felt refreshing, a stark contrast to the suffocating tension inside. Lucy nestled into her arms, her tiny body trembling. Charles approached, his expression soft. "You're safe now," he said gently. "Both of you." Elena looked at him, her gratitude shining through her tears. "Thank you. For everything." Charles nodded. "It's not over yet. But you're not alone in this. We'll make sure you and Lucy are safe." As the flashing lights of the police cars illuminated the street, Elena held Lucy tightly, vowing that this would be the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter free from fear. The chill of the night clung to Elena's skin as she stood by the police car, Lucy still wrapped tightly in her arms. The storm inside the apartment was over, but the echoes of it lingered in her mind. For years, she had endured James's rage, clinging to the hope that he would change. Now, standing under the flashing blue and red lights, she realized she had been holding onto a dream that wasn't hers to fix. Lucy had fallen silent, her small hands gripping her mother's coat. Her tear-streaked face was buried in Elena's shoulder, and the tremors in her tiny body had started to subside. Elena kissed the top of her daughter's head, whispering softly, "We're safe now. Baby. We're safe." Charles approached, his footsteps careful as if not to startle them. His presence was steady and grounding, a stark contrast to the chaos that had just unfolded. He knelt slightly to meet Elena's gaze, his voice low and reassuring. "We're taking James into custody now. He won't be able to hurt you or Lucy anymore." Elena nodded, her lips trembling as she tried to form words. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how to thank you enough." Charles gave her a small, kind smile. "You don't have to. My job is to keep you safe. And that's what we're going to do." The female officer who had been helping with Lucy earlier reappeared, holding a warm blanket and a cup of water. She gently draped the blanket over Lucy and handed the water to Elena. "You're incredibly strong," the officer said, her tone filled with warmth. "Both of you." Elena looked at the woman, her gratitude spilling over. "I don't feel strong," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I've been so scared. I didn't know how to protect her." The officer placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You did everything you could. And you called for help when it mattered most. That's strength." Lucy shifted slightly, her voice small and shaky. "Mommy, is Daddy gone?" Elena hesitated, her heart breaking at the question. "Yes, sweetheart," she said softly. "He's gone. And he won't hurt us anymore." Lucy looked up at her mother, her big eyes searching for reassurance. "Will we be okay?" Elena smiled through her tears, cupping Lucy's face in her hands. "Yes, my love. We'll be okay. I promise." Charles stood back, giving them a moment before addressing Elena again. "We'll take you both to the hospital for a checkup," he said. "After that, we'll help arrange a safe place for you to stay tonight. You won't have to go back to that apartment." Elena exhaled a shaky breath, relief washing over her. For the first time in years, she felt like there was a way forward, a path away from the fear and darkness. "Thank you," she said again, her voice steadier this time. As the police car pulled away from the scene, Elena watched the flashing lights fade into the distance. Lucy was snuggled against her side, her eyes drooping from exhaustion. Elena stroked her daughter's hair, whispering softly, "You were so brave. My sweet girl. So brave." At the hospital, the staff moved quickly, their faces calm and professional. Elena's bruises were examined, her injuries tended to with gentle care. Lucy refused to let go of her mother, her small hand clutching Elena's tightly even as the nurses tried to check her for injuries. "I'm okay," Lucy insisted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Just don't leave me." Elena pulled her daughter close, her heart aching. "I'm not going anywhere," she promised. "I'm right here." Charles stayed nearby, speaking with a colleague about the next steps. When he returned to Elena's room, he carried a bag with clean clothes and a small stuffed animal, a gesture of kindness from the hospital staff. He handed the toy to Lucy, whose eyes lit up ever so slightly at the sight of it. "This is for you," Charles said gently, "to help you feel safe." Lucy hugged the stuffed animal tightly, her small voice whispering, "Thank you." As the night wore on, the weight of everything began to settle on Elena's shoulders. The fear and adrenaline that had carried her through the night were fading, replaced by exhaustion and uncertainty. But as she looked at Lucy, nestled safely in her arms, she felt a flicker of hope. They had survived. They were free. And for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that better days were ahead. The sun rose slowly the next morning, casting a warm glow through the hospital room's small window. Elena watched the light dance on the walls as Lucy slept soundly beside her, clutching the new stuffed animal. For a brief moment, the chaos of the night before felt like a distant memory, though the bruises on her body told a different story. Charles arrived early, his calm demeanor a reassuring presence. He knocked softly on the door before entering, carrying 2 cups of coffee. "Morning, Elena," he said, offering her one of the cups. "How are you holding up?" Elena managed a small smile, her voice hoarse. "Better, I think. Lucy slept through the night, which is more than I expected." Charles nodded, glancing at the little girl, who still clung tightly to her new companion. "That's a good start," he said, his tone gentle. "The hospital has arranged for a counselor to meet with both of you. It's important to start the healing process." Elena hesitated, her fingers wrapping tightly around the coffee cup. "I don't know if I'm ready to talk about it. It all still feels so raw." "I understand," Charles replied, pulling up a chair to sit beside her. "Take it one step at a time. The important thing is to focus on you and Lucy. You've both been through something unimaginable, and healing doesn't happen overnight." Elena looked down at her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from Lucy's face. "I just want her to feel safe again," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't want her to grow up afraid." Charles leaned forward, his expression earnest. "You've already taken the hardest step by leaving that environment. Lucy is safe now, and with time and support, she'll feel that too. But don't forget to take care of yourself as well. She needs you to be strong." Elena nodded, though a wave of uncertainty washed over her. The weight of starting over felt overwhelming. But as she looked at Lucy's peaceful face, she knew she couldn't let fear hold her back. Later that day, a social worker arrived to discuss housing arrangements. "We've found a temporary place for you," the woman explained, her voice kind. "It's a secure facility for women and children, designed to provide support and resources as you rebuild." Elena felt a mix of relief and apprehension. "Thank you," she said softly. "I don't know how to do this on my own, but I'll try." "You're not alone," the social worker reassured her. "There are people here to help every step of the way." Lucy woke up as they prepared to leave, her eyes widening with worry. "Where are we going, Mommy?" "To a new place," Elena said, crouching down to her daughter's level. "Somewhere safe, where we can start fresh." Lucy clung to her mother's neck, her voice small but firm. "As long as we're together, it's okay." Elena's eyes filled with tears as she hugged her daughter tightly. "Always," she whispered. "We'll always be together." The drive to the shelter was quiet, but the atmosphere inside the car was lighter than it had been in years. Lucy stared out the window, her stuffed animal clutched tightly in her lap, while Elena took deep breaths, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions inside her. When they arrived, the shelter staff welcomed them with warm smiles and open arms. The facility was modest but clean, with colorful walls and a playroom for children. Lucy's eyes lit up at the sight of the toys, and for the first time since the ordeal, she smiled, a small, timid smile, but a smile nonetheless. As they settled into their room, Elena sat on the edge of the bed, watching Lucy explore the space. She felt a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, they could find peace here. The road ahead would be long and challenging, but for the first time, she felt like they were on the right path. Lucy climbed onto the bed, her small arms wrapping around Elena. "Mommy, are we really safe now?" Elena kissed her daughter's forehead, her voice steady despite the tears in her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, we're safe. And we're going to be okay." The first step was taken, and while the journey to healing was just beginning, Elena knew she wouldn't face it alone. They had survived the storm, and now it was time to rebuild together. The first week at the shelter passed in a blur of new routines and tentative steps toward normalcy. Each morning, Elena would wake to the soft hum of life outside their small room, a mixture of children's laughter and the low murmurs of other women, each carrying their own stories of survival. Lucy adapted quickly to the playroom, forming a bond with a little boy named Ethan, whose cheerful nature seemed to coax out her own smiles. For Elena, the days were harder. She spent hours with the shelter's counselor, unpacking years of fear and guilt. Each session was a battle with herself, but it was also a step toward understanding. You can't blame yourself for his actions, the counselor said during one session. What you're feeling is normal. But it's important to remember that his behavior was his choice, not your failure. Elena nodded, though tears welled in her eyes. I just don't know who I am anymore. For so long, my life was about keeping the peace, protecting Lucy. Now, it's like I'm starting over from nothing. The counselor leaned forward, her tone gentle but firm. Starting over is never easy, but it's also an opportunity. You're not starting from nothing, you're starting from strength. Every decision you've made to get here proves that. That evening, Elena sat with Lucy on the shelter's small patio. The sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Lucy was drawing on a piece of paper, her crayons spread out around her. What are you making, sweetheart? Elena asked, her voice soft. A house, Lucy replied, holding up the paper. The drawing was simple but filled with bright colors. This is our new house, with a big yard for Pepe to play in. Elena smiled, her heart aching at her daughter's resilience. That's a beautiful house, Lucy. One day, we'll have a real one just like that. Lucy's eyes sparkled with hope. Really? With a blue door, like the one we had before? Elena hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Yes. But this one will be different. It'll be a house filled with love and happiness. Just like your drawing. The shelter also provided job placement assistance. And within weeks, Elena found a part-time position at a local bakery. The work was modest but steady, and the friendly environment offered her a sense of normalcy she hadn't felt in years. Her co-workers welcomed her with open arms, their kindness a stark contrast to the isolation she had endured for so long. One morning, as she kneaded dough alongside her co-worker Maria, Elena mentioned Lucy's love for drawing. She's so creative, Elena said, a hint of pride in her voice. She's already dreaming of our future home. Maria smiled warmly. Children have a way of seeing the light, even in the darkest times. It's their gift to us. That evening, as Lucy proudly showed her mother another drawing, Elena felt a flicker of hope stir within her. The path ahead was still uncertain, but with each passing day, she found herself believing in the possibility of a brighter future for both of them. As the weeks turned into months, Elena began to rediscover pieces of herself that had been buried under years of fear. Life at the shelter was structured and supportive, a stark contrast to the chaos she had fled. The staff encouraged her to join workshops on budgeting, parenting, and self-defense, practical tools for her new reality. At first, she felt hesitant, even overwhelmed. But gradually, she embraced the opportunities, each one a step closer to independence. Lucy, too, blossomed in the safe and nurturing environment. Her drawings became more elaborate, often filled with bright rainbows, smiling faces, and fields of flowers. The walls of their small room soon became a gallery of her creations, each picture a testament to her resilience and hope. One day, she handed Elena a drawing with the words "I love you." Mommy scrawled across the top in wobbly letters. Elena held the picture close, tears pricking her eyes. "I love you too, Lucy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You're my sunshine." One afternoon, as Elena picked Lucy up from the shelter's daycare, a staff member approached her with a kind smile. "Elena, we've received word from a community housing program. They have a small apartment available, and your application has been approved. For a moment, Elena couldn't speak. Relief and disbelief warred within her. An apartment. For us. The staff member nodded. It's modest but safe. And it's in a neighborhood with good schools. You'll have support as you transition. The news felt like a lifeline. That evening, as she and Lucy sat on the patio, Elena shared the update. We're moving. Lucy. To our own apartment. Lucy's eyes widened with excitement. Will it have a blue door? Elena laughed softly, the sound surprising even herself. I don't know about that. But it will be our new home. The day they moved, Elena felt a mix of apprehension and anticipation. The apartment was small but clean, with sunlight streaming through the windows. For the first time in years, she felt a sense of ownership over her life. She and Lucy unpacked their few belongings, filling the space with their laughter and hope. Elena used her newfound stability to focus on building a future. She enrolled in a night class at a local community college, determined to improve her skills and increase her career prospects. Her days were long, filled with work, classes, and caring for Lucy. But each task felt purposeful. One evening, as she sat at the small kitchen table, studying while Lucy colored beside her, Elena glanced at her daughter. What do you think about our new home? Lucy looked up, her face thoughtful. It's the best, Mommy. But you're the best part. Elena reached out to stroke Lucy's hair, her heart swelling with love. And you're my reason for everything, sweetheart. Though the journey was far from over, Elena felt a quiet strength growing within her. With Lucy by her side, she was no longer just surviving, she was starting to truly live. Elena was beginning to find her footing in her new life. Days turned into weeks, and a routine emerged: work during the day, classes at night, and quiet evenings spent with Lucy in their little apartment. Yet, even in this newfound stability, shadows of the past lingered. One evening, as she tucked Lucy into bed, her daughter looked up with wide, innocent eyes. Mommy, do you think Daddy is still mad? Elena froze for a moment, her hand resting on Lucy's soft hair. The question cut deeper than she expected. But she knew Lucy needed an answer, one that wouldn't instill fear but would also honor the truth. She took a deep breath. Daddy isn't mad anymore, sweetheart. He's somewhere getting the help he needs so he can feel better. Lucy seemed to consider this, her little brow furrowing. Do you think he'll be nice someday? Elena's heart ached. She wanted to promise her daughter the world, but she had learned the importance of honesty. I hope so, Lucy. But no matter what, I'll always keep you safe. Lucy nodded, satisfied for now, and drifted to sleep. Elena sat by her bedside for a while, watching her daughter's peaceful face. The journey they'd endured together had left scars, but it had also made them stronger. And in this moment, Elena vowed to face whatever came next with courage. The next week, Elena received an unexpected phone call from Charles. His calm, familiar voice brought back memories of the night he had rescued them. Elena, I wanted to update you, he said. James has been attending therapy sessions as part of his treatment program. He's making progress. But it's a long road. Elena didn't know how to feel. A part of her was relieved that James was being held accountable and receiving help. But another part of her felt a lingering resentment. Thank you for letting me know, she said after a moment. Is he aware of us? Charles hesitated. He's asked about Lucy a few times. But I made it clear that your safety is the priority. Any communication would only happen if you consent. Elena felt a wave of gratitude for Charles's consideration. Thank you, she said softly. I'll think about it. After hanging up, she spent the evening in quiet reflection. Could she ever allow James back into their lives? Even in a small way? The idea terrified her. But she couldn't ignore the small voice inside her that whispered about forgiveness, not for James's sake, but for her own. The following Sunday, she and Lucy spent the day at the park. enjoying the crisp air and golden sunshine. As Lucy laughed and ran through the playground, Elena sat on a bench, her thoughts turning to the future. She had come so far, but there was still more to do, more healing, more growing, and more living. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a warm glow, Elena stood and called to Lucy. "Come on, sweetheart. Let's go home." Lucy ran to her, her face flushed and happy. "Okay, Mommy," she said, slipping her tiny hand into Elena's. As they walked together, Elena felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, she felt ready to embrace it. With Lucy by her side and a heart full of determination, she knew they could face anything. As the days passed, Elena found herself embracing the small joys of her new life. Each morning began with Lucy's bright smile as they shared breakfast together. Evenings were filled with stories, laughter, and quiet moments that strengthened their bond. But despite these moments of happiness, Elena knew the road to healing was still unfolding for both of them. One evening, she decided to join a local support group for survivors of domestic violence. The meeting was held in a small, cozy community center, where a circle of chairs invited participants to share their stories. Elena hesitated at the door, unsure if she was ready to open up to strangers. But as she glanced at Lucy's drawing tucked in her purse, a picture of them holding hands beneath a rainbow, she took a deep breath and stepped inside. The stories she heard that night were both heartbreaking and inspiring. Women of all ages spoke of their pain, resilience, and journeys to reclaim their lives. When it was Elena's turn, she hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I was in a situation where I felt trapped for years," she began. "But I left. Not just for myself, but for my daughter. She's the reason I found the strength to walk away." The group listened with quiet empathy, and when Elena finished, a woman across the circle smiled gently. "You're stronger than you think," she said. "And by showing your daughter what courage looks like, you're giving her a gift that will last a lifetime." Elena left the meeting feeling a weight lifted from her shoulders. Sharing her story, even in small steps, gave her a sense of empowerment she hadn't felt before. Over the following weeks, she continued attending the group, building connections with others who understood her journey. Meanwhile, Lucy began to blossom in their new environment. She made friends at school and often came home with stories of her adventures on the playground. One afternoon, as Elena helped her with homework, Lucy looked up with a thoughtful expression. "Mommy, do you think we'll always be happy like this?" Elena paused, her heart aching at the vulnerability in her daughter's question. She knelt beside Lucy, taking her small hands in her own. "Happiness isn't about everything being perfect all the time," she said gently. "It's about finding joy in the little things. Even when life is hard, and as long as we have each other, we'll always have something to be happy about." Lucy nodded, her smile returning. "I like that. Mommy, you're the best." Elena hugged her tightly, feeling a surge of love and determination. Lucy's resilience reminded her of the strength they both carried, the strength to heal, grow, and create a brighter future. As the weeks turned into months, Elena continued to rebuild her life. She completed her training program and secured a stable job that allowed her to provide for Lucy. Each step forward brought new challenges, but also new opportunities. One evening, as they sat together under a starry sky, Lucy pointed upward. "Look, Mommy, that star is really bright." Elena followed her daughter's gaze and smiled. "That's our star, Lucy. A reminder that no matter what happens, we'll always find our way." And in that moment, Elena knew they were finally free to dream, free to love, and free to live the life they deserved. As life began to settle into a new rhythm, Elena couldn't shake the lingering shadows of the past. While Lucy seemed to adapt more easily, Elena found herself grappling with unexpected emotions. A loud noise or a sudden movement could send her heart racing. her mind conjuring memories of the fear she had endured. One night, after tucking Lucy into bed, Elena sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. The quiet of the house felt both comforting and unsettling. Her thoughts drifted to James. Despite everything, she couldn't help but wonder if he was receiving the help he needed. She hated what he had done, but a part of her still mourned the man she once loved. The man who had made her laugh and dreamed of a future together. Lost in thought, Elena nearly jumped when her phone buzzed. It was a message from Charles, the officer who had been with them throughout the ordeal. "Hi Elena. I hope you and Lucy are doing well. Just wanted to let you know that James has been admitted to a treatment facility. He'll be under close supervision for the foreseeable future. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." Elena stared at the message for a long moment before replying. "Thank you, Charles. We're doing okay. It's good to know James is getting the help he needs. I appreciate everything you've done for us." After sending the message, she leaned back in her chair, her gaze drifting to the framed photo on the counter. It was a picture of her and Lucy, taken just a week after they had moved into their new home. Lucy's smile was radiant, her eyes sparkling with hope. For the first time in years, Elena had started to feel that hope, too. The next morning, Elena decided to take Lucy to the park. It was a crisp, sunny day, the kind that felt like a fresh start. Lucy ran ahead, her laughter ringing out as she joined a group of children playing on the swings. Elena sat on a nearby bench, watching her daughter with a mix of pride and longing. She wished she could feel as carefree as Lucy seemed. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" A woman's voice pulled Elena from her thoughts. She turned to see Mary, their former neighbor, sitting down beside her. Elena smiled warmly. "It is. How have you been, Mary?" Mary nodded. "I've been well, but I've been thinking about you and Lucy. How are things?" "We're doing better," Elena said, glancing back at her daughter. "It's not easy, but we're managing. Lucy's been amazing through all of this." Mary smiled knowingly. "She gets that from you. You know, you've been through so much. But here you are, making a new life for her." Elena felt a lump rise in her throat. "I just want her to be happy. She deserves that. And so do you," Mary said gently. "Don't forget that." As they sat together, Elena realized how much the support of others had carried her through this journey. Though the shadows of the past still lingered, she knew she wasn't facing them alone. Elena returned home from the park feeling lighter than she had in a long time. Lucy, with her cheeks flushed from playing, skipped ahead, clutching her stuffed bear. Pepe, watching her daughter's joy was like a balm to Elena's soul. A reminder of why she had fought so hard to escape the darkness that once enveloped their lives. As they entered their cozy apartment, the smell of freshly baked cookies greeted them, a gift from their new neighbor, Susan. Susan was a retired schoolteacher who had taken an immediate liking to Lucy. She often brought over small treats and stayed to chat with Elena, sharing stories from her decades of teaching. It was a small but meaningful connection, one that made Elena feel less alone. Lucy ran to the kitchen table, where the plate of cookies sat, her eyes lighting up. "Mommy, can I have one?" Elena smiled. "Of course, sweetheart. Just one before dinner, though." Lucy nodded enthusiastically, taking a cookie and settling down at the table with Pepe. Elena watched her, feeling a pang of gratitude for moments like this, simple, peaceful, and free from fear. Later that evening, as Lucy colored in her sketchbook, Elena decided to check her email. Among the usual messages was one from the local support group she had joined for survivors of domestic violence. They were hosting a community meeting later in the week, and the email encouraged members to share their stories if they felt comfortable. Elena hesitated, her finger hovering over the reply button. The thought of standing in front of strangers and recounting her trauma was daunting. But then she glanced at Lucy, who was carefully drawing a rainbow with her crayons. Her daughter had been her strength through it all. And maybe it was time for Elena to find her own voice. She typed a quick reply, agreeing to attend the meeting, though she wasn't sure if she'd share her story. The idea alone was enough for now. The day of the meeting came quickly. As Elena entered the community center, she was greeted by warm smiles and nods of encouragement. The room was filled with people of all ages and backgrounds, their faces reflecting a shared understanding of pain and resilience. Elena took a seat near the back, feeling a mix of nerves and curiosity. The meeting began with a woman named Carla sharing her story. She spoke about her journey from fear to freedom, her voice steady but filled with emotion. As Carla spoke, Elena found herself nodding along, relating to the struggle and the strength it took to rebuild a life. When the facilitator asked if anyone else wanted to speak, Elena's heart raced. She glanced at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap, and then at the faces around her. Slowly, she raised her hand. "I'd like to share," she said, her voice trembling. As she stood up, a hush fell over the room. Taking a deep breath, Elena began to speak, her words spilling out like a river finally breaking through a dam. She told her story, not just the pain and fear but also the love and hope that had carried her through. By the time she finished, tears streamed down her face. But she felt lighter, freer. The room erupted in applause. And as she sat down, the woman next to her leaned over and whispered, "You're stronger than you know." Walking home that night, Elena felt a new sense of purpose. She realized that sharing her story wasn't just about healing herself, it was about helping others see that they, too, could survive and thrive. It was the beginning of a bridge, one that connected her past to her future and, most importantly, connected her to others who needed hope. As days turned into weeks, the ripple effect of Elena's story began to unfold. Word spread through the local support network about the woman who had shared her harrowing tale with such courage and grace. Elena received messages of gratitude from others who had attended the meeting, thanking her for inspiring them to confront their own fears. Some even reached out to ask for advice or simply to share their own experiences, creating a web of solidarity and healing. For Elena, life continued to improve in small but meaningful ways. She started volunteering at the community center, helping organize events and providing a listening ear to those who needed it. It wasn't just about giving back, it was about reinforcing her own resilience. Each story she heard, every hand she held, reminded her of the strength she had found within herself. Lucy, too, was thriving. She had made new friends at her school, and her teachers often praised her creativity and kindness. One day, Lucy brought home a drawing she was especially proud of, a picture of her and Elena holding hands under a bright blue sky. Above them was a rainbow, the word hope written in shaky, colorful letters. "Mommy, this is for you," Lucy said, handing over the drawing with a wide smile. Elena knelt down, taking the picture in her hands. Tears welled in her eyes as she hugged Lucy tightly. "It's beautiful. Sweetheart. Thank you." Lucy beamed. "It's because you're my hero, Mommy." Those words echoed in Elena's heart long after Lucy had gone to bed that night. She looked at the drawing, now pinned to the refrigerator, and felt a renewed determination to ensure that her daughter would never have to endure fear or uncertainty again. One afternoon, while volunteering at the center, Elena was approached by Carla, the woman who had spoken at the meeting weeks earlier. Carla's warm smile and confident demeanor had initially intimidated Elena, but now she felt a kinship with her. "I've been meaning to talk to you," Carla said. "Your story really moved me, Elena. We're starting a new program here, a mentorship initiative for women who are just beginning their journey out of abusive situations. I think you'd be perfect for it." Elena blinked, taken aback. "Me? A mentor?" Carla nodded. "You've already inspired so many people just by sharing your story. Imagine how much more you could do by guiding someone through the process, step by step. You know what it's like. That kind of understanding is priceless. Elena hesitated, her mind racing. The idea both excited and terrified her. Could she really take on such a responsibility? But then she thought of Lucy, of the rainbow and the word hope. If she could offer that same hope to someone else, how could she say no? "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady. "I'd be honored." Carla smiled, placing a hand on Elena's shoulder. "You're going to make a difference, Elena. I can feel it." That evening, as Elena sat at her kitchen table, she wrote in her journal a habit she had picked up during her healing process. Her pen moved steadily across the page as she reflected on the twists and turns of her journey. From the darkest moments of fear and despair to the light of new beginnings, she had discovered a strength she never knew she possessed. She closed her journal and looked out the window, the fading light of the sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Life wasn't perfect, and there were still challenges ahead. But for the first time in years, Elena felt truly at peace. In her heart, she knew she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, fully, bravely, and with a purpose that extended far beyond herself. And that was a victory worth celebrating. The mentorship program became a pivotal part of Elena's life. Each week, she met with women who were navigating the first steps out of abusive relationships. These meetings were raw and emotional, often filled with tears and confessions of fears that felt insurmountable. But Elena knew from her own experience that those fears were not permanent. During one of her sessions, she met Clara, a young mother with a 1-year-old son. Clara's voice trembled as she spoke about the emotional abuse she had endured for years. "I stayed because I thought it was the right thing for my son," she confessed, her hands gripping a tissue. "But now, I'm scared he'll grow up thinking this is normal." Elena listened intently, her heart aching for Clara. "You've already made the hardest decision, Clara," she said gently. "You chose to leave. That takes incredible strength. Now it's about building a life where both you and your son feel safe and loved." Clara wiped her eyes, looking at Elena with a mixture of vulnerability and determination. "How do you move on? How do you stop feeling like it's all your fault?" Elena paused, choosing her words carefully. "It's a process, Clara. Some days, you'll feel strong and hopeful, and other days, the weight of it all will feel unbearable. But you don't have to go through it alone. Surround yourself with people who support you, who remind you that you're worth so much more than what you've been through." As the weeks passed, Elena saw Clara transform. Her posture straightened, her voice grew steadier, and the spark of self-confidence returned to her eyes. Watching Clara's progress felt like witnessing her own journey all over again, a reminder of how far she had come and how much further she could still go. Outside of the mentorship program, Elena continued to focus on her new life with Lucy. Their days were filled with simple joys, baking cookies together, reading bedtime stories, and exploring the park near their home. Lucy's laughter was a constant source of light in Elena's life, a sound that reminded her of the resilience of the human spirit. One day, Lucy came home from school clutching a flyer. "Mommy, look, there's a talent show at school. Can I be in it?" Elena smiled, brushing a strand of hair from Lucy's face. "Of course, sweetheart. What do you want to do?" "I want to sing," Lucy said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I'll sing a happy song for you." As Lucy practiced her song in the evenings, Elena couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. Her daughter had endured so much, yet here she was, shining brighter than ever. The talent show became a milestone for both of them, a symbol of resilience and the joy of reclaiming their lives. On the night of the performance, Lucy stood on the brightly lit stage, her small voice filling the auditorium with a melody of hope and love. As Elena watched from the audience, her heart felt full. This was what healing looked like, finding beauty and strength in the midst of life's challenges. When Lucy finished her song, the crowd erupted into applause. Elena clapped the hardest, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, she knew they were not just surviving, They were thriving. Together. As the applause from Lucy's talent show performance faded into Elena's memory, she realized just how far they had come. But healing wasn't just about moving forward, it was also about reconciling with the past. And there was one part of their past she still needed to confront: James. Elena had kept up with the updates from the court-appointed officials overseeing James's case. He was in a mandated treatment center, undergoing therapy and medication for his mental health. Though she hadn't seen him since the day of his arrest. A letter arrived one morning that brought him back into her thoughts. The envelope was plain, with her name written in James's familiar handwriting. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside was a simple note. Elena. I've started therapy. And for the first time, I see clearly. I've been reading books about what I did, trying to understand the pain I caused. I know I can never undo it. But I want you to know I'm sorry. Not for my sake, but for yours and Lucy's. I hope one day you can forgive me, even if just in your heart. James. Elena sat with the letter for a long time. A mix of emotions swirled within her: anger, sadness, relief, and even a trace of pity. She wasn't sure if she could forgive him, not yet. At least, but she appreciated his acknowledgement of the harm he had caused. It was a small step, but a significant one. She decided to keep the letter in a drawer, where it wouldn't be forgotten but also wouldn't weigh on her daily life. Healing wasn't about rushing to forgiveness, it was about making peace with her own heart. Meanwhile, Lucy continued to thrive in their new environment. Her school performance had given her a newfound confidence. She started making friends and joining activities, from art classes to a beginner's soccer team. Each time Elena watched Lucy chase a soccer ball across the field or beam with pride after finishing a drawing, her heart swelled. One Saturday morning, as Elena prepared breakfast, Lucy sat at the kitchen table coloring. "Mommy," Lucy asked, her tone curious. "Why don't we have a daddy?" The question caught Elena off guard. She set the spatula down and turned to her daughter. "That's a big question, sweetie," she said gently, "but I'll try to answer it." Elena sat down beside Lucy, brushing her daughter's hair back softly. "Not all families look the same," she began. "Some have a mom and a dad. Some have just one parent. And some have two moms or two dads. What's important is that the people in a family love and take care of each other." Lucy seemed to think about this for a moment. "Do you think Daddy will ever come back?" Elena hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "Right now, Daddy is getting help because he made choices that weren't good for us. I don't know what the future will hold. But no matter what happens, you and I will always be a team." Lucy smiled at that. "I like our team," she said, holding up her drawing of the two of them surrounded by hearts. Elena hugged her tightly, silently thanking the universe for the strength they had found together. Later that day, Elena received a call from Charles. He often checked in, even though the official case was closed. "I just wanted to see how you and Lucy are doing," he said. "We're good," Elena replied. "Better than I ever thought we'd be. Honestly." Charles's voice softened. "That's wonderful to hear. You've come a long way, Elena. I hope you know how strong you are." After the call, Elena reflected on his words. She had spent so much time surviving that she hadn't stopped to celebrate the life she was building. But now, as she watched Lucy giggling over her latest masterpiece, she realized they weren't just living, they were thriving. As spring turned to summer, Elena and Lucy embraced the warmth of their new life. Their days were filled with simple joys: walks in the park, movie nights at home, and shared moments of laughter. Each day felt like a step further away from the shadows of the past and closer to a future brimming with light. One bright Saturday afternoon, Elena took Lucy to a local community fair. The scent of fresh popcorn wafted through the air, and cheerful music played from a nearby stage. Lucy's eyes sparkled as she darted from booth to booth, marveling at everything from balloon animals to handmade crafts. "Mommy, look!" Lucy exclaimed. Pointing to a face-painting booth, she tugged on Elena's hand. And soon, Lucy was sitting still as an artist carefully painted a butterfly on her cheek. When the painting was done, Lucy spun around to face Elena. "Am I pretty?" she asked, grinning wide. Elena knelt to her daughter's level, her heart swelling with pride and love. "You're the most beautiful butterfly I've ever seen," she said, planting a kiss on Lucy's forehead. As they wandered further into the fair, they stumbled upon a booth raising awareness for survivors of domestic violence. Elena hesitated, her steps slowing as she read the pamphlets and posters displayed. The images and words brought back memories she was working hard to leave behind. But they also reminded her of the strength it had taken to get to where she was now. "Are you okay, Mommy?" Lucy asked, noticing her mother's pause. Elena smiled down at her daughter, taking a deep breath. "I am, sweetheart. Sometimes, I just think about how far we've come." Lucy nodded, not fully understanding but sensing her mother's emotions. She reached up and grabbed Elena's hand, squeezing it tightly. "We're a team," she said, her voice filled with certainty. Elena crouched down to hug her daughter, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. "Yes, we are," she whispered. Later that evening, as they sat together on the couch, Elena brought out a journal she had started keeping. Writing had become a way for her to process her thoughts and reflect on her journey. Lucy, ever curious, asked, "What are you writing?" "Mommy, I'm writing about us," Elena replied. "About how strong and brave you are and how much I love you." Lucy beamed. "Can I write something too?" Elena handed Lucy a pen, and the little girl carefully wrote in her big, wobbly letters, "I love Mommy. We are happy." Tears welled in Elena's eyes as she read Lucy's words. It was a simple sentence, but it carried the weight of everything they had endured and overcome. Before bedtime, Lucy held her mother's hand tightly as they said their nightly prayer. "Thank you for my mommy," Lucy whispered, her voice soft but firm. "And thank you for my Lucy," Elena added, her heart full. As they turned out the lights, Elena lay in bed reflecting on their day. The past still lingered, but it no longer defined her. For the first time in years, she felt truly free. The future stretched out before her like a blank canvas, waiting to be painted with moments of love, growth, and endless possibilities. With the community fair still fresh in her mind, Elena decided to take a bold step toward healing and rebuilding. The following Monday, she reached out to the organization that had hosted the domestic violence awareness booth. After a heartfelt phone conversation with one of the counselors, she scheduled her first session to share her story and seek guidance. When the day arrived, Elena sat nervously in the small, cozy counseling office. The walls were adorned with uplifting quotes, and the room exuded warmth. But the prospect of reliving her past was daunting. Across from her, a kind-faced woman named Lisa introduced herself. "Take your time," Lisa said gently, sensing Elena's hesitation. "You're in a safe place here." Elena nodded, clasping her hands tightly in her lap. Slowly, she began to speak, her words tentative at first but gaining strength as the minutes passed. She recounted the years of fear and pain, the moment she found the courage to protect Lucy, and the relief of finally breaking free. "I just want Lucy to grow up in a home filled with love," Elena said, her voice cracking with emotion. "I don't ever want her to feel the way I did." Lisa smiled reassuringly. "You've already given her that gift by taking this step. Healing is a journey, and you're showing Lucy what it means to be strong and resilient." By the end of the session, Elena felt lighter, as though a small part of the burden she'd carried for so long had been lifted. Lisa encouraged her to attend a support group where she could connect with others who had faced similar struggles. At her first group meeting, Elena was surprised by the diverse stories she heard. Each person had a unique journey, but they all shared a common thread of resilience and hope. Listening to their experiences, Elena realized she was not alone. When it was her turn to speak, she hesitated for a moment before sharing her story. The group's warmth and understanding gave her the courage to open up fully. After the meeting, a woman named Carla approached Elena. "Your story really resonated with me," Carla said. "It's amazing how much strength you've shown for Lucy." Elena smiled, feeling an instant connection. "Thank you. It hasn't been easy, but I'm trying." Over the next few weeks, Elena and Carla became close friends. They supported each other through moments of doubt and celebrated small victories. Carla, a single mother herself, often brought her son to play with Lucy, creating a new sense of community for both families. One evening, as Elena watched Lucy and Carla's son laughing together in the park, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. The life she was building wasn't perfect, but it was filled with love, hope, and the promise of better days. Elena turned to Carla, her voice filled with conviction. "For the first time in years, I feel like I'm finally starting to live again." Carla nodded. "We're not just surviving anymore, we're thriving." As the months passed, Elena found herself increasingly drawn to the idea of closure, not just for herself, but for Lucy. While they were thriving in their new lives, the shadow of the past still loomed, particularly in the form of unanswered questions. What would become of James? Could he ever change? And more importantly, how should she explain him to Lucy as she grew older? One afternoon, during a session with Lisa, Elena voiced her concerns. "Lucy is getting stronger every day, but I know there will come a time when she asks about her father. I don't want her to carry anger or confusion because of what he did." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "It's natural to want to shield her from pain, but children are perceptive. The truth, delivered with care and age-appropriate honesty, can help her process what happened. Have you considered writing her a letter to read when she's older?" The suggestion resonated deeply with Elena. That evening, after Lucy had fallen asleep, she sat at her small desk and began to write. The words didn't come easily at first, but as she thought of Lucy's bright eyes and resilient spirit, the letter began to flow. "My dearest Lucy," she wrote, "there will come a time when you wonder about your father and the life we left behind. I want you to know that none of what happened was your fault. Your father loved you in his own way, but he was a man who carried many wounds he didn't know how to heal." The act of writing was both cathartic and painful. Elena didn't shy away from the truth, but she also focused on the lessons they had learned. She wanted Lucy to see their story not as one of tragedy, but of strength and renewal. A few days later, Elena received a call from Charles. "Elena," he began, his voice steady, "I wanted to update you on James. He's been undergoing treatment and has shown signs of improvement. He's expressed remorse for his actions and is asking for a chance to communicate with you." Elena's heart raced. The idea of speaking with James again was both daunting and overwhelming. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted. "But if he's truly trying to change, maybe it's something I should consider for closure." Charles assured her that any communication would be mediated and completely on her terms. After much thought, Elena agreed to a monitored video call. On the day of the call, her hands trembled as she sat in front of the screen. Charles was present to ensure her safety and comfort. When James appeared on the screen, Elena barely recognized him. He looked thinner, his face lined with exhaustion but also with a hint of clarity. "Elena," he began, his voice cracking, "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I let my demons control me, and I hurt the two people I loved most." Elena listened, her emotions a whirlwind. While she wasn't ready to forgive fully, she acknowledged the courage it took for James to face his mistakes. "What's done is done, James. My focus is on giving Lucy the life she deserves. If you're truly working on yourself, I hope you find peace." The call ended, leaving Elena emotionally drained but also strangely lighter. She realized that while the wounds James had inflicted would take time to heal, her strength and Lucy's love were more than enough to carry them forward. After the conversation with James, Elena felt an unexpected mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a cautious hope. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a step toward releasing the weight she'd carried for so long. She reminded herself that healing was a journey, not a destination. And every small step mattered. In the weeks that followed, life began to settle into a rhythm. Elena's new job at the office was a welcome distraction. She threw herself into her work, finding satisfaction in each task completed and every connection built with her colleagues. They respected her professionalism and admired her quiet strength, though they knew little about the hardships she had endured. Elena preferred it that way. This was her fresh start, a chance to define herself on her own terms. Lucy, too, was thriving. Her once frightened eyes now sparkled with curiosity and joy as she adapted to her new school. She had made friends quickly, her natural kindness and bright spirit drawing others to her. Elena would often watch Lucy playing in the yard, her laughter ringing out like music, and feel a profound sense of gratitude. Despite everything, they had made it to a place of safety and love. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Lucy snuggled against her mother with her favorite book in hand. "Mommy," she said softly, "do you think Daddy will ever come back?" The question hit Elena like a wave, but she had prepared for this moment. Taking a deep breath, she wrapped her arms around Lucy and chose her words carefully. "Sweetheart, your daddy is working on getting better. Sometimes people have big feelings they don't know how to handle, and it makes them act in ways that hurt others. But you and I are safe now, and that's what's most important." Lucy nodded, her small face thoughtful. "Do you think he misses us?" Elena's throat tightened. "I think he does. In his own way. But right now, he's in a place where he needs to focus on fixing the things inside him that are broken." Lucy seemed to accept this, leaning her head against Elena's shoulder. "I hope he gets better," she whispered. Tears filled Elena's eyes as she kissed the top of Lucy's head. "Me too. My love. Me too." Later that night, as Elena tucked Lucy into bed, she reflected on how far they had come. There had been moments of darkness so profound she thought they might never escape it. But here they were, still standing, still fighting, and still finding joy in the little things. Elena turned off the light and stepped out onto the small balcony of their apartment. The night air was cool, and the stars above seemed to shine a little brighter than usual. She closed her eyes, letting the calm of the evening wash over her. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to dream not just of survival, but of happiness. Their journey wasn't over, but Elena knew they were heading toward something better. Together, she and Lucy would continue to rebuild their lives, one day at a time, with love as their foundation and hope lighting their way. As the sun set on their new chapter, Rachel and Lily stood on the porch of their cozy home, hand in hand. The nightmare they had endured now felt like a distant memory, replaced by the warm embrace of hope and safety. Every day brought new challenges, but it also brought small victories, moments of laughter, shared meals, and the quiet joy of simply being together. Rachel had found a new job she loved, one that allowed her to rebuild her confidence, while Lily thrived in her new school, her bright smile slowly returning. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, proving that love and resilience could overcome even the darkest of times. Rachel often marveled at Lily's courage, her little girl who had shown so much strength in the face of fear. For Rachel, Lily was her beacon of hope, a reminder of why she had fought so hard to break free from the pain of the past. Through their journey, they learned profound lessons about the power of community and the importance of standing up against injustice. Neighbors like Paul and Emily, and the dedicated officers who risked their lives, had shown them that even in the darkest moments, kindness and empathy could shine through. Now, as they looked toward the future, Rachel knew their story was far from over. But this time, it would be a story of healing, love, and unshakable determination to create a brighter world for Lily. Thank you for being a part of this journey with us. If Rachel and Lily's story touched your heart, consider subscribing to Life Stories for more heartfelt tales of resilience, hope, and the power of human connection. Your support inspires us to keep sharing stories that matter. See you in the next video.